Hey guys, welcome. Welcome to Cults to Consciousness, our an additional segment of Culty News. I'm joined by the amazing Cara Burrell slash Nuancehoe. If you don't subscribe to her channel already, you definitely should. She's hilarious and debunks a whole bunch of Mormon truth claims, and it's so juicy. Thanks, Cara, for joining us.
Thank you, Shelise. Appreciate you. Everyone
Yeah.
from my audience, welcome the Nuancehoe YouTube channel. And what I'm making my third episode of my new podcast, officially, this is going to be it, is my new podcast is called The Mormon History Hoedown. And coming at you live with some juicy news about the beginning of the new Mormon Civil War. That's what I'm going to call it. I'm gonna play prophet and predict this story is big news.
It is big news. In fact, just when I was doing my research before this and I just typed in Tim Ballard, US Senate, there were so many news sources covering it. They pretty much had
Yep.
essentially the same story, which is why I'm excited to hear what you have to bring to the table because I know you did a lot more extensive research than I did and you have all this stuff prepared. Thank you for that. So if you are just tuning in and you're like, what are we talking about today? Tim Ballard, he's the guy who the Sound of Freedom movie was kind of based around. We'll get into all that juicy detail as well. But he kind of, like someone said in the comments, has a God complex, claims that he saw Jesus. It's a whole thing. So, Cara, I know you wanted to do a little intro on Tim. So, what do you got?
I wake up this morning and I see that Mormon Stories has reposted something that Glenn Beck said, which I will have to share on screen in a second. And the long story short is that Tim Ballard, this CIA officer turned child rescuer of sex trafficking with Operation Underground Railroad, who is a very famous Mormon, kind of wears Mormonism on his sleeve. I would say that he is guilty of kind of some affinity fraud, which is another thing that I want to get into, and that the Mormon Church, through a statement through their PR department, has publicly denounced ties with Tim Ballard. And he
Yeah.
goes in front of a group of people. He has them film him and he says, I don't know anything about this. None of this is true. Elder Ballard, who is senior, how would you describe Elder Ballard? I don't know if he's the leader
He's
of the
an
Quorum of the 12. He's an apostle.
he is the president of the Quorum of the 12, which is, if you're not familiar with Mormon lingo, everybody, it's like the higher ups in the church, the top 12 aside from the prophet. It's like as high as you can go.
Right, exactly. So even though Elder Ballard, M. Russell Ballard, and Tim Ballard, they're not related, they share the same last name. It turns out that there's some type of affinity fraud here going on where in his operations with Operation Underground Railroad to do these highly dubious, kind of illegal sex trafficking rescues of children, that they had been using a psychic, a Mormon psychic. That's a whole other issue we'll get into too. A Mormon psychic who'd been communicating with dead prophets of the church, like Nephi from the Book of Mormon, and that Tim Ballard had run this entire operation with a very Mormon staff at OUR and Mormon donors telling people that he had been meeting monthly or catching Elder Ballard up on his operations, including the ones about using psychics to talk to dead Mormon prophets on the missions that they were doing in these foreign countries to save children. So the church has tried to distance themselves. And in the church, they have excommunications that go through, your bishop, your stake president, you have a council. Many, many people, friends of mine, have been excommunicated from the LDS church. This is for Tim Ballard to run this entire operation with so many Mormons involved in a way where he now is being denounced by the church. It is effectively excommunicating him. It's like effectively booting him out of the church. Oops, I moved my mic. Without any type of counsel. And I wake up this morning and I see all of these posts of Glenn Beck on Twitter, apparently what I would say not knowing how his church works. Not knowing that the church often does just use you until they want to distance you or distance themselves from you. So
Okay,
I can't wait to get into the different pieces of these stories. It's crazy, right?
Jump in real quick because when you told me that this psychic was channeling Nephi. I just have to say, okay, I have to preface this whole thing with a few things. The first, yes, human trafficking, child trafficking is real, and it is definitely something that needs attention. And that is not, we are not saying the work that he's apparently doing is wrong. We're saying, like, yes, we need to help these children. The first thing. I don't want anyone to come after me like, what? You don't want to help the children? The other thing is, I'm not saying psychics aren't real. I'm not saying they are. I'm not saying they aren't. But what's funny about that part of the story, Kara, is that Nephi is a fictional character. He's made up. He's not a real person. And so that's what just made me crack up so hard, because all of the characters in the Book of Mormon are essentially fan fiction, and that's just really funny. So I just had to point that out.
And let us also point out that there is certain factions of Mormonism throughout history that have broken off and kind of live by their own new set of rules of how they're allowed to do things and get away with very dangerous things. And so the reason why I think this story is so insanely important is because it is our modern 2023 break off of the ultra type of right-wing Mormons, the QAnon type of Mormons, people who have high levels of deception kind of already baked into their way that they do Mormonism. Okay. And the fact that the Mormon church claims this authority that it's able to do things, give blessings, ordinances, and all of that through what? The power of the priesthood. That is the proposition of Mormonism, is that the church was restored to have these special keys to do God's work. And the fact that Tim Ballard was going outside of those types of priesthood keys to do what I would hope would be the work of the Lord, is saving trafficked kids, he's using female psychic mediums, doing a type of practice that in and of itself could get somebody excommunicated. And then all within that, saying, when people in his organization, different Mormons that work for him, saying, are you sure this is okay? And he says, it's A-okay by Elder Ballard. That all of this, these entire operations, there's times in this article that we'll get into where when people are testifying about what they saw inside the organization, like we're about to do, he did this one operation to save some kids that turned out to be a horrible failure. And before he goes in, obviously he's going to pray that God's going to bless this operation before they go in. And it turned out to be this horrible failure. But before he goes in, he says, Elder Ballard, told me that him and God sign off on what we're doing right now. They give us our blessing. So he's speaking in this type of, again, very common in Mormon culture type of language, that the priesthood leaders above us, we know better than you. All of this is sanctioned. Even if the evidence doesn't lead you to that conclusion, we hold a special mantle of discernment and so forth. And that's where it gets really, really dangerous.
Yes. There's so much to get into. I don't know if you have this in your slideshow or not, but I'll just mention quickly that the Mormon Church actually did have information supporting Tim on their website, which has recently been removed, as shown by the screenshots on Mormon Stories Instagram, which, shout out to Mormon Stories. You're giving us all the deets and we appreciate you. I think they're going live tomorrow. So I just found it interesting that it's not like they never held support for him. It's they cut it off abruptly and were like, whoa, we've never had anything to do with them, So little piece of information. So do you want to get into all the juicy stuff that you brought, Kara?
Yeah. Let's start with, gonna throw the video up on screen. So as I just described, Tim Ballard is in shock by this. And by shock, I mean, he has to also know that he shouldn't have been doing a lot of the things that he's been doing. He's been, as soon as Sound of Freedom movie came out, around that same time, there were some concerns that came up in the nonprofit that he runs, Operation Underground Railroad, and it went through PR, and he ended up, we still don't really know what those accusations are and what the issue was, but it could very well be people complaining about this type of affinity fraud that he's doing. So as soon as Sound of Freedom came out, he steps down. And so he has to know that there are a lot of people who are tired of his crap for a while. And the biggest one of all is the Mormon Church. And I will explain exactly why as we go on, why it is so ironic and must be so painful for Tim Ballard that the church that he's been trying to bring people to doesn't want anything to do with them. So he's on this tour in Boston, apparently, and he says, I want everyone to pay attention, film this, take this out to the media outlets. I have no idea what's going on. So we'll watch this, and then I want to respond with a few of the articles.
So that's what we're doing. We're taking it to media.
Okay.
Nothing in here is true. President Ballard is like a grandfather to me. He came to me in, I don't know, 2012, 2011. And he told me that he appreciates all the things I'm doing and he wants to help me do it.
All right, so just pause. He's confused, and he's going to be denying that he's been using the name of Elder M. Russell Ballard for his clout, for his businesses, for his nonprofits, to raise money for these for-profit businesses, movies, TV series, books, all these kinds of things. Because again, Tim Ballard is the type of person where in Utah especially that has the highest rate per capita of fraud and like Ponzi schemes and like MLMs and things, that the affinity of people that are around you is a major player in Mormon culture. So not only does he have the last name Ballard, which doesn't tie to M. Russell Ballard, they're not related, but there's a high amount of affinity fraud going on here. And he's so confused. And he's saying, yeah, he's just like a grandpa to me. But watch what he says next.
Never in my life, never have I used his name to raise money, to make some business deal. What business deal? I don't have business.
Okay. You can go full screen for a sec. He's like, to raise money for a business? What business? All right. In a second, I want to show you there's a lot of businesses that Tim Ballard is in charge of. But even in the way that he describes this, he's like, what? I've never even used his name. I haven't done anything with his name. He's like a grandfather to me. And then in about a second, he says that this is unheard of, that I call my stake president. He doesn't know anything about this. I call my bishop. He doesn't know anything about this. You know what wandering minds want to know, Shelise?
What?
If M. Russell Ballard is like a grandpa to you, why don't you call him yourself? It tells me that there's been a falling out, and this is not a surprise to you. Right?
Oh, yeah. That's a good point.
Okay. So if we can pull up the video one more time, and I'm going to skip back to one important thing. So there was a famous whiteboard meeting with Tim Ballard, and he asked his associates that were there present at his meeting of kind of what his overall game plan was going to be, to not tell anyone about this. They had to sign NDAs of what his mission was. And Shelise, can you guess what his mission was? Overall, what is this whiteboard alluding to?
To make him rich and famous and bring people to Mormonism.
Bingo. So some of you guys might already have known this, but I think it's really interesting that you can't really tell, but there has been a Lynn Packer is a journalist who was a professor at BYU. Mormon Stories has an entire episode with Lynn Packer describing the ways that Tim has been able to use this type of affinity fraud to get in to the good graces of Mormons using his good name. There's pictures of him, I'll show you in a second, where he's speaking at Ensign College, which is owned by the church. And he's saying things like, I prayed with my wife if in the temple, if I should, leave the CIA and start this business, essentially, to be able to get a high salary, raise tons of money, keep a lot of it, have a lot of shady deals going on. And that I prayed, and my wife and I decided that was the right thing to do. And he also talks about in the Vice article that M. Russell Ballard encouraged him to do this entire operation as well. So Lynn Packer has a great Mormon stories exposing a lot of this. And one of the reconstructions, if I can get to it. Oh, dang it. There we go. At the top
easier
of
to
it.
read.
So Slave Stealers LLC, for profit at the very top. On the side, Child Liberation Foundation. Okay. Down underneath that, that's the Operation Underground Railroad. And that's what he calls the sizzle. That's what gets people's interest. That's the if it bleeds, it leads kind of stuff to get people's attention for what you're trying to go to. At the bottom, timballard.com, Sound of Freedom movie. He wants millions of dollars in the bank account, book deals, speaking fees, and then ultimately, as we'll talk about, being a type of white savior, being a type of savior for the Mormon church itself that people can put their trust in, that the Mormon church is a covenant people. They moved to Utah to establish Zion, and that they believe that they are the chosen people of God, and that within this established American nation, from the pilgrims being saved by God to establish this nation, that we must retain those founding fathers, very patriotic, very like hyper right-wing kind of conspiracy QAnon, one interpretation of history that this is the best country that's ever existed. And we're the chosen people to make sure that that freedom is spread out to everyone. And it's the Mormons, American Mormons specifically, job and covenant with God to do that. And I cannot overstate enough how that is part of his mission. So we go back to the top. Slave Stealers LLC is the for-profit. Brian Norton are the leaders. Tim Ballard. And then what is there next to it?
Russell
Ballard, in parentheses, that he would be a silent partner. So it shows that they are going to be controlling different for-profit businesses, and that donors will pay into the for-profit entities under this auspice, that they will then be able to move people through this sizzle chain and eventually kind of lead people back to Jesus Christ in the form of the Mormon church.
So real quick, we have a couple people confused in the comments, and I get it. It's a lot, and even I'm still trying to put together the pieces. So someone asked, can someone please summarize this so far? So actually, that whiteboard is a pretty good representation of what we're talking about. So on one hand, we have the Sound of Freedom movie, which is based on Operation Underground Railroad. It's been fact-checked through court documents that that movie was basically 99% fiction, and it was based on an event that things went very differently in real life with Tim Ballard, who the movie was kind of centered around. And then on the other hand, we have Tim Ballard, who now is like, I'm a hero, even though a lot of people aren't agreeing with that, wanting to run for U.S. Senate and take the seat of Mitt Romney in Utah, who is going to retire. So you have him wanting to run for U.S. Senate, and the church, the Mormon church, because he's very Mormon, the Mormon church is like, wait a second, we don't want anything to do with him. He is using our name and using the apostles' name to get clout. And now we have, I don't know if it's proof for sure or if it's just alleged things, but we've read it in a few places saying that he thinks he is basically the next Messiah, and Jesus came to him and said the second coming is near. That's also a very big prevalent thing within Mormon theology. It's the second coming. It's the latter days, hence Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he needs to do something about it. So he is considering running for this political position. So those are all of the pieces. And that whiteboard perfectly illustrated how they were all connected and what his overarching plan was. So hopefully that makes sense. Did I explain that right, Kara? Did I miss something?
Perfect summary of my rambling. I'm just so excited.
You're doing a great job. It's a lot to follow.
Mine is the one where I'm like, listen, sis, I have some hot goss for you. And yours is the news reporter throttling me. Perfect.
We're a good team. Okay, so did you want to keep talking about the whiteboard or move on to a different piece of info?
So yeah, let's go back to what Tim was shouting. And again, for anyone who's just joined, the reason why it's so important to bring up M. Russell Ballard's name on this whiteboard that he had his employees signed an NDA that they could not release was for good reason. And again, he's saying, I don't know anything about this. I don't know why this is happening to me. I have to call my stake president and say, I'm basically effectively excommunicated. He can't call the person he just called like a grandpa to him on the phone and say, hey, person who's on my whiteboard who's going to help me do all of this white saviorism, answer my phone call. Why did your PR department just tell me that they are denouncing me and all of my operations as morally reprehensible? He can't make that phone call. So he just kind of is shook in front of this crowd. So let's go back to
yeah. So someone was asking who made the whiteboard, and it was him, right? He's the one that drew it
He
all
drew
up,
the
and his
whiteboard.
employees were in the room, and it was a very long meeting.
Exactly. And after each individual signed Ballard's non-disclosure agreement, they assembled in the meeting room in Paul Hutchinson's luxury home on a whiteboard. Tim Ballard presented the overall strategy of what he would call his master plan, each member's role, and how each of their respective organizations would funnel donor money to his for-profit business, Slave Stealers, LLC. And that basically a lot of that sizzle in those different projects, like Operation Underground Railroad, that is part of the sizzle. It's facilitating as kind of like money laundering in a way. Those are the things that are going to make people pay attention and get him to be a household name, to trust him with all of these other businesses and projects that he's up to that are for profit. Okay.
Which I feel like it kind of worked in some ways. That movie was a hit, and even though there's some controversy around it, controversy makes something even more prevalent. And so I think in some ways he was probably feeling high and mighty and like, yeah, this is happening. One of our, I don't know how many were on the bottom of that thing. It was like 9 different things to get him to funnel to the main box. And that was just one of them. And he was probably like, well, shit, well, dang it, guys. We did it.
Yeah.
So
one of them is orphanage in Haiti. And I hate the word like sizzle around something that's supposed to be an orphanage when there are children in distress and they are part of your master plan for something that leads to anything that has to do with a for-profit business or timballard.com. I do not want to hear orphanage in one of the most like poverty-stricken countries in the entire world be called something that has to do with your sizzle. But anyway.
Yeah.
All right, play.
Yeah.
Yes. It's not true. Nothing in here is true. President Ballard is like a grandfather to me. He came to me in, I don't know, 2012, 2011. And he told me that he appreciates all the things I'm doing and he wants to help me do it. Never in my life, never have I used his name to raise money, to make some business deal. What business deal? I don't have business. It's never happened. But all the press in Utah is claiming that some church representative is saying that I can't get confirmation whether it's true or not true, if it was authorized or not. I don't know. So this is breaking up my family like you can't believe. My children are being harassed right now because everybody believes that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that I've defended for how many years? I've written how many books? Made how much money for Deseret book on my hypothesis books? And nobody can tell me. Guess what? Do you think I called my stake president? I said, "Do you know about this?" No idea. I don't believe the church did this. I truly don't.
Me either.
Can you imagine that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints publicly condemn one of his members
No.
without talking to
Yes.
Pause it there.
Where have you been, Tim?
Yeah. So that's where part of me feels bad for him, because in his mind, he has been so dedicated to this church, and he's right. Yeah, he has sold a lot of books to Deseret Book. And what are those books about, though? They're a book that are written to a certain audience that the church is not going to be very excited about having to betray now when that audience gets too out of control with their conspiracies, with their Ponzi schemes, with their belief that they can act out of accordance of the priesthood, the way that faction of the church can now say that they have certain connections that are embarrassing to church leaders. So yeah, all different types of people get excommunicated and booted from the LDS church when the church just basically gets embarrassed about something or other. Again, going back to the premise of this church is founded on the idea that they have the priesthood, that they have the ability to have this mantle of discernment, and anything that embarrasses them, that they don't have those things, they try to push under the rug. If you think back to like Gordon B. Hinckley, the Mark Hoffman debacle, forged documents, not knowing that like a murderer was standing in front of them, trying to sell them forged documents. Anything that the church feels embarrassed by, they're going to try to scrub. Unfortunately, Tim is correct in the way where this is wild, though, that it came from a PR representative from the church, and that they're going to have an entire mess on their hands now, because this is quite a public way to just make a splash that this man is excommunicated, because they have to know that this is going to cause a huge, I think, civil war. What do you think, Shelise?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I don't know. You said he's also kind of in the same ring as Ron Meldrum, who is very extreme, who the church has said we're not really affiliated with him, right? So maybe it won't be as bad as we think, but also because he's trying to be a political figure, maybe it will. I do feel bad for his kids, though. His kids shouldn't suffer for this man's actions.
Right.
And I do really feel for them in that sense, especially, I mean, John Dillon has talked about it, how his kids suffer because of the work that he does. And when you live in Utah, unfortunately, that's the reality when you're someone who speaks out. And so I do feel bad for him in that sense.
Yeah. There's no shortage of empathy from me on people who are in all different types of cults, obviously, where they can't really control their environment and their genetics and the people who raised them. And there's going to be a lot of people who are just victims of their circumstances, you know? So I can go in a couple places next.
Okay.
Do you want to finish the video, or should we start reading the article?
Let's start reading the article, unless there's something that you really wanted to touch on that's in the video.
We can finish up the video in a second, I think, because it's funnier to know the information first.
Okay.
And then I can't wait to show you what Glenn Beck had to say.
Yes.
Glenn Beck, another famous LDS person in media with his radio show and various books in the right-wing circles, has been a big friend and I believe investor in everything, Tim. So starting with this Breaking Vice article, Mormon Church denounces Tim Ballard's morally unacceptable activities. That is a strong statement.
Yeah.
So a church spokesman tells Vice News that Ballard betrayed the friendship with a powerful leader who never authorized his name or the name of the church to be used under Tim's personal or financial interests. That leader again, M. Russell Ballard of the Apostles. So if anyone doesn't believe, because that's so echoing back to what he said, he goes into this thing, Tim Ballard does in that clip that I was showing, where he's like, do you believe that the LDS church would do this? Yes, I do believe that they would excommunicate you if you're embarrassing them. But then he goes on to say that they would give a statement to Vice News, Vice, who's written articles like promoting the idea that pedophiles can be called minor attracted persons. So he's thinking that the LDS Church is just working with the devil and that it cannot be the LDS Church. Again, giving himself this type of special pleading that like, this is not the reality of the situation. But as we'll find out, how Vice obtained these quotes, and it's not just that the church went to Vice. The same quotes, the same statements are in church-owned Deseret News.
Right.
So Tim Ballard, same type of headline there. So the article, again, this is the Deseret News article quoting the Vice News article. So if the church-owned newspapers, Deseret News is quoting the Vice article, Tim Ballard, you can't just say that like this cannot be the work of the LDS Church. The LDS Church's PR department who released this statement, that's going to be under the same umbrella of the same church that runs Deseret News. Unfortunately, it's not just like everyone in media who has access to the internet who's saying bad things about you works for Satan. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So the article starts with, yes, that he is considering a run for Senate. So with that kind of being leaked to the news, I think the church wants to get ahead of itself by saying that they do not support him overall as a person. So
yeah.
All right. Anything you want to summarize there? Have I made sense so far?
No, I think that was good.
Okay. So Ballard, whose career was the inspiration for the recent box office hit Sound of Freedom, has also been the source of controversy and the subject of an investigation that did not result in any charges. Vice reported on Friday that Tim Ballard had allegedly claimed his work and other projects were endorsed by M. Russell Ballard, acting president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The two men share the last name, but they are not related. And then it goes on to quote the statement that the church released. Shelise, do you want to read that? Because I've been talking so much.
It's really small on my screen, so I don't think I can.
Okay, it's even smaller on mine, babe.
This big.
Oh, you only knew what I'm working with. 20/20 vision over here.
I could try to make it bigger.
No, I got it.
Okay.
So the statement from the church reads, President Ballard and Tim Ballard, no relation, established a friendship a number of years ago. That friendship was built on a shared interest in looking after God's children wherever they are and without regard to their circumstances. However, that relationship is in the past. For many months, President Ballard has had no contact with the founder of Operation Underground Railroad. The nature of that relationship was always in support of vulnerable children being abused, trafficked, and otherwise neglected. Once it became clear Tim Ballard had betrayed their friendship through the unauthorized use of President Ballard's name for Tim Ballard's personal advantage and activity regarded
as morally unacceptable.
Oh, there you go.
I made
personal
it bigger.
advantage and activity regarded as morally unacceptable. Morally unacceptable. And again, that could just be that he had these investigations under his own nonprofit that still people do not know what has come to light. Or it could just be basically that Elder Ballard doesn't like the different failures and the different media controversy and opinions of what his operation does, and some of the more nefarious dealings. And there's just something more below the surface of that morally unacceptable wording, because it is a strong choice to be condemning him so hard, so publicly with a statement like this. President Ballard withdrew his association. President Ballard never authorized his name or the name of the church to be used for Tim's personal or financial interests. In addition, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints never endorsed, supported, or represented OUR, Tim Ballard, or any projects associated with them. President Ballard loves children all over the world. It has been part of his life mission, blah, blah, blah. Church founded on child sex trafficking and women trafficking, and a church that, if you look into its history, Mormon history, is a history of polygamy and just things like that are just basic to, you kind of have to, if you want to be against sex trafficking, I am with you on that. We also have to talk about the doctrines and the policies of the church and the ways that it's fought to keep secrets and move different Boy Scout leaders around. And the video I'm working on next week, side project, a history of sex abuse in the church. It's going to be heavy. and not funny at all. But it's just it's a
Important.
passion of mine that I'm going to end a statement like that, I have to roll my eyes a little bit. Sorry, I have to be disrespectful when they're like, and he loves children. Yep,
Right.
that's definitely what the doctrines and history and policies of your church shows. Anyway.
Yeah, so that's the official statement, and it was published on Deseret News, which is owned by the LDS Church.
So it's a little bit official. All right. So let's jump to watching a little bit more of the clip, and then I want to read some of the article. Do you remember where we were? Let's just hypothetically say we're here.
On his name to ask for anything. I've never had any business dealings with him. He's like a grandfather to me, and Leo can testify. He's a grandfather. He asked me to take him on this tour. President M. Russell Ballard asked me to take him on this tour. I didn't. It wasn't my idea. You were here, Coop. I was here. What? Tell me what you experienced.
Then basically he just asks his sons and his like other relatives to be like, back up me as well. You know, M. Russell Ballard, the thing that we are saying now is the truth. He was just a grandfather, and in no way have I ever said that I have a special connection with him that would gain money and prominence for my businesses. It just so happens that we're such good friends. He told me to take him on this tour, and things when I say, anyway, the point that I'm making here is like, he's acting like, yeah, he's like my grandfather. I love him so much. We're like best friends, but I never in a million years would ever use the fact that like, he tells me that he wants me to take him on these like Boston City tours of American history. And like, he is on the top of my whiteboard that is like one of the silent investors. And like, besides all of the times that I talked to all of my staff and told them that M. Russell Ballard believes in this entire operation and sanctions it. So by one account, yes, I have that part of my personality that like loves talking about it. But hey, my son, my 18-year-old son, he says, and like my other friends, haven't I never, ever thrown around his name that like we're besties? You see the insanity? He's losing it on camera.
Yeah.
I'll keep playing it for a sec.
By the way, if anybody wants to share this with any news outlet, do it. Share it. Something evil is going on. I don't know who's behind it yet.
He loved the tour.
Explain to this group my relationship with President Ballard.
He loved the concept of the American Covenant. He loved this tour.
All right, pause. Again, like I said earlier, this is what comes up. See the sneaky things. The concept of the American Covenant. What is that? It is the idea. I just watched a video on it right before we started. Another side thing. Remember when we were talking about Rod Meldrum, the Firm Foundation Book of Mormon Evidence Conference? Tim Ballard has spoke at that many, many times. And I went on their website because I have a backstage. I have a pass. I paid $80 for it. I should be able to access all the Tim Ballard speaking conference videos just like anybody else. And I went to go access it. And when I put in my name, Nuancehoe, I was not allowed to get in. And I was like, did they know? I told Shelise, I was like, do they know that person named Nuancehoe only has this pass so that they can go watch their videos and put them on Cults to Consciousness?
We did that, guys, by the way. Yeah. If you're like, what? We did that. I think what is it?
Rod Meldrum's in the thumbnail with me. It's that one.
Yeah.
Guy with the mustache. Mormon propaganda. I had to go behind the paywall. But when I went to go, I was like, well, I want to know more about Tim Ballard's idea of this covenant. And it's got to be in his speeches on this conference. I wasn't able to get in because I think their entire website is down because there's got to be correct. Like, I'm not conspiratorial. There's got to be at least 8 speeches that Tim Ballard gave at their conference. And you're going to tell me that not a single one of them, he didn't say anything where like, I'm close friends with M. Russell Ballard and he approves this following message, you know? And like, I'm highly suspicious that their website is down right now because they, just like the Mormon Church, are trying to scrub any connection with him. Unless, if they don't, that's where the Civil War comes in. That's where the ultra right-wing faction, that's where the Glenn Becks and the Rod Meldrums and the Hannah Stoddards and the Russ Barlows and the Ward Radios and the Cardinalises. That's where they all go off to that schism with Tim Ballard down like the Lafferty Brothers pipeline. I don't know, something else that's just like that's already got a groove. There's already been so many grooves of break off Mormonism, and we haven't had a good one for a while. And I'm ready for this one. But anyway, back on topic.
Yeah. I also have to wonder if Rod is also distancing himself because the LDS Church distanced himself, or if he's trying to protect Tim by putting the website out. And also, we don't know if that's why the website is down. We can speculate, but I think it's worth speculating because it's so interesting, because Rod Meldrum is very, very extreme, so extreme that even the Mormon Church denounced him and was like, no, I don't know, what you're saying is a little too much. So if even Rod is denouncing Tim, that's like, whoa, guys.
That's what I'm going to check on and see. Yeah.
Yeah. But also, someone mentioned, and I think we should wrap this around, someone was like, how do we know that that statement from the church was true? So did you do some digging on that to find out who made that statement?
Yep. It's in the bottom of the Vice News article. I can pull it up in just a second.
Okay.
Yeah, the last thing that I was going to wrap around was what he just said. He asked his son, he's like, tell me what Russell Ballard thinks of this whole system. And he said that he believes in this American covenant, and then when I was able to watch things that weren't behind the paywall from Rod Meldrum, basically, yeah, there's this idea again of that this is a chosen land set aside by God, that Lehi is this Jewish family that left in 600 BC. His Book of Mormon people are the Native Americans of this land. That's a literal belief of people in this faction of Mormonism. But again, the things that even that faction of Mormonism has in common with the main branch, there are so many overlaps. For example, things that both the apostles of the church, the most mainstream that you can get, certified on every LDS website, are still the foundational things that people in Tim Ballard's faction would still believe, that like Nephi, who was one of the authors to the Book of Mormon, that is a literal person, and that he foresaw the pilgrims landing in America, that God provided the pilgrims miracles to save them from being starving to death. And the pilgrims and the Constitution prepared America for the restoration of the Mormon gospel. That Joseph Smith would not have been able to restore the gospel until the exact right time in 1820, 1830, and that the foundations of America were brought forth by God. That this is a chosen land to restore this gospel for Joseph Smith and for the brown-skinned, dark-colored, old Jew Lamanites who turned into be the Native Americans, for them to be those Lamanites to be converted, to repent of their sins, and that it's part of the Mormon gospel going all the way back to Joseph Smith, that these are not just hypotheticals, that these are true stories of the Native Americans and the foundations of America, this tug of war, this push and pull between God sending his chosen servant and Joseph Smith restoring these keys and spreading the gospel through the entire land. And that starts with America being founded. That starts with Mormonism being founded. And that starts with men like Tim Ballard thinking that they are God's chosen type of saviors to usher in this entire operation that he's got going. So how shocking to his system must it be that this American covenant that apparently M. Russell Ballard has been on board with this whole entire time, something is
not on board with
now. He's going out of his way to publicly denounce him.
Yeah, it begs the question, was he ever on board, or was he actually on board? And that's why Tim is so shocked, because now he publicly, without texting Tim and being like, hey, this got out of hand, I need to separate myself from you. Like, is Tim a little cuckoo about thinking he had the support of this apostle, this major apostle? Maybe he misinterpreted something that they had said to one another, like a interaction they had. Or was there really something going on? And then the apostle was like, nope, never mind. And real quick on the whole nationalism thing within Mormonism, I just have to point out for people who aren't familiar with Mormonism, the reason that America is so it's such a big deal in Mormonism, aside from what you've said already, Kara, is Jesus, when he was resurrected, apparently wafted his way over and visited the United States as well. So that's one reason, is like, yeah, it's another testament of Jesus Christ, and he came to the people in the States too. Like, isn't that great? And then what else? Well, the fact that the chosen people, like you said, established, according to them, the Native American people established, and then the other people came over and made it what it is now, America. Now it's like the perfect recipe to reinstate God's one true church on the earth. Oh, and the Garden of Eden is in New York. And it's like, there's all of these things that make America super amazing. And so it's
Yeah,
really not that far of a stretch to try and understand why Tim Ballard is feeling in this sort of way.
exactly. It's all goes to do with American exceptionalism, which is ironic because I think he started this entire quest with OUR after working in the CIA in Chile and seeing the poverty and the sex trafficking and all of the unrest that came after the American CIA itself infiltrated and installed like a puppet dictator and caused that type of distress. And so it's kind of like he's like, oh my gosh, America, best country on earth. I need to go into other countries to save these sad brown children who are put at more distress because of my country and my operation. Forget that entire part of it. But then there is an underlying level of racism, especially here too, because Tim Ballard would not be able to do these type of heroic operations under the laws of the United States of America. And he has to go into other places where he's able to get away with the types of operations that he does. He's able to film them. He's able to film, these sad brown kids that pull at the heartstrings of wealthy white Mormon, donors, perhaps, that they're able to funnel all of this money into nonprofit, quote unquote, and also for-profit ventures, all under this sizzle, the sizzle scape of Tim Ballard, exploiting these children who, of course, we all are against sex trafficking, but the ways that sex trafficking actually happens often and people are put in these destitute situations are something that people do not want to address. Like I said, not just with Mormon history, but with, people who are LGBTQ being kicked out of their house. But who's the best child to advocate for? The most innocent victim that you don't need to know anything about their story. You can just kind of give money to this operation. If you're a Mormon, it's honestly, it's a Mormon guy, Tim Ballard. He's got the approval of apparently our apostle. This must have some good, this must be a good thing.
Credibility.
It's all under his credibility and his stewardship and discernment. And of course, we want to bring as many people into the Mormon church as possible. And the best way to do that is, who is their hero? Tim Ballard, white Mormon guy, So it's got an exploitive nature to it.
Yeah, real quick, for people who are just joining and maybe think that we are against the efforts to support ending child trafficking, human trafficking, that is not the case. What we are criticizing is that in the beginning of this, we showed this whiteboard interview where Tim was laying out his master plan of how to become essentially this Messiah and bring people to the Mormon church. And all of these different efforts were a part. It was like a sizzle, a way to get people interested, to funnel money into his own name, his own website, his books, his whatever, to prop him up. So we are not saying we are against the efforts to support the end of child trafficking, human trafficking. We are against the exploitative nature and the way that he is going about this and gaining donors based off of clout that apparently, according to the statement of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, does not exist. So I hope that that's very clear. And I just wanted to say that one more time in case you were just joining and trying to figure out why we're crapping on this Underground Railroad situation.
Perfect. And let me expand upon that, and then we'll go back into the article. That it is a Utah-based nonprofit that primarily that has a paramilitary force, and its mission is to rescue, hopefully, child sex slaves from pimps, kidnappers, and brothels in foreign countries. In the United States, OUR also assists law enforcement crack down on pedophiles who troll the internet for child victims. OUR's highest profile advocates and fundraisers are former Homeland Security agent Tim Ballard and Utah Attorney General Sean Reyes. Patriot and warrior coming for the Senate seat soon. The organization has likely collected more than $80 million to help sex crime officers conduct stings to nab pedophiles. OUR is now under criminal investigation. So this is previous. This is when it was under criminal investigation. I think that's closed now under the Davis County Attorney's Office with regard to how it solicits and manages donations. So there was an investigation, but its red flags include unproven claims and bogus fundraising pitches, which I think would include a pitch that there's some type of, again, affinity fraud going on, that you can trust me more than you would trust another person. Your critical thinking can kind of be put on a shelf for a little while because, again, in Mormonism, there's this special connection that I'm a priesthood holder, I worked for the CIA, I've got the endorsement of such and such. So who knows how his fundraising pitches would have gone. Emphasis on stranger danger pedophiles rather than pedophiles known to child victims and their parents. That, again, I just wanted to expand on what Shelise said, that of course, everything that has to do with child exploitation and any type of exploitation, sexually of adult or child or otherwise, is something I wholeheartedly condemn and put shivers down my spine. And I would want to end in the most ethical, poignant ways possible in our society and around the world. But he emphasizes, again, these other countries where he's able to do a lot more exploitive types of rescue missions that are filmed and that, again, create more of this sizzle for himself, for his clout, and for his nonprofit and for-profit businesses. And part of that is that the dangers come from strangers, whereas we know that most people who are abused and exploited that is done so by somebody that they are closely related to, that is not a stranger. And that he's also politically highly partisan, and everything, again, the red flags include that it's highly infused with Mormonism. Again, in this Vice article that we can continue to read, that it has to do with using psychics who are talking to dead Mormon prophets from the Book of Mormon, like Nephi, that are instructing them on their stings of these exploited children, infusing that with Mormonism. So there are the red flags.
Yeah, and I also want to point out that what you just read, Kara, was not just on a Vice article. I found it in multiple different sources during my research before this. In fact, I think it was even on the Salt Lake Tribune website. So there's many people who are reporting on the questionable nature of Operation Underground Railroad and the charges that were put against them in the past. So we are doing our best to do our due diligence in looking at all these different resources, not just taking one resource's word for it. We are doing our best to bring you the most accurate news possible as it comes out. So, Kara, what do you have for us next?
I think we should continue to read the article a little bit. So, documents obtained by Vice show anti-trafficking against Tim Ballard claimed that a revered and powerful figure in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints played a secret central role in Operation Underground Railroad, or OUR, the organization Ballard founded. Insiders who spoke to federal and local investigators, insiders of OUR, spoke to the investigators as part of that since closed criminal inquiry, described Ballard, which I'm assuming is the Davis County one, described Ballard claiming that OUR and his personal business ventures were backed by a senior member of the church's second highest leadership body. Again, that's the apostleship of M. Russell Ballard, and part of a larger mission to use the anti-trafficking cause to bring Americans to the Mormon faith, or in his word, lead them to the covenant. So missionaries, 60 to 80,000 missionaries around the world between the ages of 18 and 20, not enough. Other ways to lead people to the covenant. whatever Tim Ballard is up to.
Yeah.
And then, so this is a quote. Tim is fully convinced that he is supposed to be the Mormon Messiah and lead people back to the church. Read notes from an interview between criminal investigators and a former OUR higher up. But now spokesperson for the church tells Vice News that while the apostle in question, M. Russell Ballard, was once close to Tim Ballard, to whom he is not related, despite them sharing the last name, the OUR founder betrayed their friendship through the unauthorized use of President Ballard's name for Tim Ballard's personal advantage and activity regarded as morally unacceptable. Wow. Elder Ballard's relationship with Tim Ballard is, the church spokesperson told Vice News, in the past, they did not specify what activity was regarded as morally unacceptable. So again, that's the thing in question. Tim Ballard did not respond to a detailed request for comment. OUR provided a statement, which is reproduced below. The unusually public denunciation of Tim Ballard is particularly newsworthy at this moment. He left OUR earlier this year following an internal investigation into employee complaints about his conduct. At virtually the same moment, The Sound of Freedom, a fictionalized version of his purported child rescuing exploits, became a surprise box office hit. He has since begun promoting a new anti-trafficking organization, the Spear Fund. Have you heard anything about that?
No, I haven't.
All I can tell so far is that that is going to be another umbrella over all of, at the top of that pyramid, that's going to be another for-profit umbrella that's going to include all of these things, because he's basically been kicked out of his own organization and he's going to be doing the same type of things under a new umbrella.
Another sizzle, you mean? According to his whiteboard chart?
Yes. Yes, exactly. And maybe with a different apostle, which I'll get into.
Oh, okay.
Yes. It's all there in the article. He is also said by many Utah insiders to be weighing a run for Senate, speculating that he was given more weight by a recent statement from Sean Reyes, the Utah Attorney General, who's also a longtime friend and supporter. Reyes wrote that he would not be running for Senate. Okay, yes, so he is stepping down along with Mitt Romney, allowing an opportunity for a dear friend of mine who is a great conservative patriot and warrior to run and serve as the next senator from Utah. Reyes said that person would announce their run in the coming days. So it's pretty easy to guess who that's going to be.
Okay, so Reyes is an attorney general, and he was saying he's not running for Senate, but he wants Tim. Well, in so many words, he was like, I got a guy. And we all think that it's Tim.
And then it goes on to say, according to the documents, described exceptionally close ties between the two Ballards. Elder Ballard, who's in his 90s, is the acting president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, an extremely senior position within the church, and is viewed by faithful Mormons as a profound spiritual and moral authority. Again, cannot overstate that enough if you're not familiar with Mormonism. M. Russell Ballard is a household name. He's an apostle of the church. His picture is on the wall of every seminary, building, classroom. You go to certain Mormon friends of mine's homes, it's in front of their piano, every single apostle with their name, so their kids memorize it. So M. Russell Ballard is definitely seen as somebody that has spiritual and moral authority, that if he's known to be signing off on and approving these actions by Tim Ballard, that holds a lot of weight. Continuing, people familiar with OUR's operations have previously told Vice News that Tim Ballard has sometimes claimed that Elder Ballard personally urged him to quit his previous job at Homeland Security Investigations to found OUR. Again, that's another big claim, that these are the people from the inside of the organization speaking out and kind of giving the lowdown on how they were able to believe extra firmly that this is not just a good organization, but something that is of God, of their Mormon God, especially.
Yeah.
The ties between Tim Ballard and Elder Ballard are described in the documents are numerous and occasionally bizarre, involving claimed business arrangements, blessings, and even a psychic who claimed to be able to communicate with the prophet Nephi, who, according to the Book of Mormon, has been dead for thousands of years. I love that reporting. Some journalist is like, who, according to the Book of Mormon, let me fact check this. He died, let's see, 600 BC, basically.
I'm sure the first thing they Googled when they're like, oh, who's the Mormon prophet Nephi? And then they were probably like, oh, wait, he's just in this book. It's like just this random character, not anyone that we actually know existed. It's funny.
He came from when Jerusalem was destroyed. He made a boat with his brothers, Laman and Lemuel, making fun of him in a region that's not known for its great boat building trees and smelting things out of ore to create a boat that sailed around America, that America was completely unpopulated before his family got there. And the inhabitants of all of the Polynesian and islands and Central, South, and North America are all from Nephi's family, basically. Nephi's family and his brothers and his dad. That is who the psychic is praying to on where to help the missing, exploiting children. And again, we want to help children who are being exploited. Anyone who is in these types of destitute situations, get help and do it through actual means of not connecting to a realm where fictional characters are seen as the highest authority. That just, that hurts me. It's not even funny. It's just, if I could swear, I would have so many expletives right now. Kara, you can swear. It would take up the rest of the show. I can't. It just makes me so mad that this is the type of operation that they're running, that Mormonism is so serious to them that they're calling on the direction of dead Mormon prophets. And this is something that people have funneled, $8 million into. And who's at the top of it? Somebody with like a Ouija board talking to Nephi. Cool. Great. Just on brand for Mormonism. I'm sorry.
I agree. Is there something else you wanted to show us? I'm just next. And Kara prepared all of this, guys.
I did it in like 2 hours with my kids screaming too. And I was just like, draw me a picture. I'll pay you for it. Just let me research this on Tim Ballard right now.
You did a great job.
So that's crazy enough. And then allegations from a former OUR higher up, as well as text messages contained all the documents obtained by Vice News, suggest that Tim Ballard and an associate representing Elder Ballard as a partner in a for-profit business called Slave Stealers, and then that for later, which was pitched as a way to control OUR and other nonprofits. So remember that pyramid. I can show it again if somebody's missed it. So that's Slave Stealers is up there at the top as a way to control OUR and other nonprofits. It was apparently viewed as part of a scheme that would allow Tim Ballard to monetize the notoriety he gained through his often exaggerated exploits. Tim Ballard also claimed, according to the documents, that Elder Ballard maintained close contact with him during at least one disastrous overseas mission. So that's what I talked about earlier at the beginning, that they're under the idea that their apostle, so many of these employees at OUR, that their own acting apostle, who they believe is a prophet, seer, revelator that is in touch with Jesus Christ, is technically overseeing their operation. And endorsing it and giving his blessing to it. And then a disastrous mission ended up happening, which was based on information obtained by the psychic medium and aimed at rescuing a missing child. Ballard said the Mormon elder blessed him and his wife, Catherine, beforehand and received real-time updates from the ground. That's pretty serious interaction for Tim in that video to be like, I have never, where he's a grandpa to me, but it's not that he endorses any of this. I haven't asked for that. He just, again, if you go back to that video of what his son said, he's like, yeah, Elder Ballard believes in this American covenant. That is a specific phrase. That's a specific book of that's a specific book of Tim Ballard's and a specific speech, a specific rant, specific lane that his faction has kind of coined about this American covenant. So to say for his son to be like, yeah, he loves him like a grandpa, believes in this American covenant. It's very obvious that M. Russell Ballard is now only just trying to distance him while he's running for Senate, and that there's a lot of embarrassment going on in the top leadership of the church right now that are wanting to distance themselves from this, which they weren't doing previously.
Yeah.
In response to a detailed request for comment on these matters, a spokesperson for the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints sent a statement which reads in full. So I already read that, so we can skip that part. It's the same thing, I believe, as earlier.
Which website is this on?
This is the Vice article, but the same quote is also in Deseret News.
Right. Okay.
And that is the statement from not anyone. it'll say who specifically it was, but it is from like the head PR department of the church. And he has a name. I think it's Paul something. We'll get to it in a second. Let's see. In addition, yes.
That's one where like, we love children.
Yeah, we love children. In an email to Sean Reyes, the Utah Attorney General, Troy Rawlings, a prosecutor in Davis County, Utah, whose office carried out the now closed investigation into OUR, wrote that he had somewhere around 10,000 pages of psychic readings on where to find missing children as communicated to them by dead Mormon prophets. Okay. Those were conducted by Janet Russin, a psychic medium who talks to dead Mormon leaders, particularly a Mormon prophet from 6000 BC named Nephi, to get intel, Rawlings wrote. Russin declined to comment on her work. So the psychic was reached out. She declined to comment. Rawlings made it clear that he thought donors to OUR would be dismayed by the idea that its prime paramilitary missions, okay, they're going in with guns. They're going in with, what are those called? Bulletproof jackets? I don't watch enough war movies. They're going in with paramilitary force to save these children. Again, this is not against sex trafficking. And there's so much obnoxious, like, oh, it's just this like leftist media in the secular world. They hate the movie Sound of Freedom because they love children being exploited, because that's secretly all that they want to do. My channel, your channel, Shelise, everything revolves around people in systems who have been exploited and know what that's like. And that is like the sole mission of my life, is for people to recognize how they've been exploited in perhaps cults or some other type of way. So to throw around this accusation that it's like people like us, we just don't want kids to be saved. We love when people are in vulnerable circumstances and are sold into sex slavery. Couldn't be further from the truth. Again, that's Mormonism's start. And if the entire thing, that the donors of these missions using this type of military force that are done in such an exploitative way, where they're filming it and not doing some type of best practice that actually ensures that these children are safe and with some type of checks and balances that you would need for such a delicate type of operation with children, vulnerable children and dangerous people around. And then to know that that's all being conducted by psychics. Donors should know these things. And it's important that this information gets out to the public of how dangerous this type of faction of believing you have the mantle of God, the authority to act in his name, that you are allowed to call on the name of the apostles, and that nothing bad is going to happen to you because you work for the Lord. This is the Lord's mission, regardless of the checks and balances, regardless of the exploitation that happens. If you get rich, if you get famous, there's a prosperity gospel in all of this too, that if you are looking to invest in something that's going to be a huge win for God, what's better than helping, poor exploited children? There's just so many different factors in this that just, it's such a tale of what Mormonism is, and it's not a surprise. I've been ranting for a while.
You got it. You said all the
got
things.
it, Karen. I'm just like, this hits at the core of it, because I'm like, when you have these fantastical supernatural beliefs in one type of Mormonism, that's dangerous enough. But things like the Lafferty brothers and Under the Banner of Heaven, and like my parents have gone to all of Rod Meldrum's conferences. They are the type of people who, the Lafferty brothers, if you don't know, the Under the Banner of Heaven movement that murdered
their own family
woman
members
and her baby. Yeah, their own family members. They're a family of chiropractics. The one that gave the weapons to the brothers that ended up murdering, he's my parents' current chiropractic. Like today they go see him for all of their medical problems. Like, there are factions within Mormonism that are very personal to me that just are so insane, because they have the ability to think that not only is this church absolutely 1,000% correct, that these people speak for Jesus Christ, but then within that, if they don't believe in the vaccine or anything that is not within the most kosher version of Mormonism, but they still know better because they have this mantle. That is a very dangerous game to play. And that is kind of the game of Mormon religion, where you have this personal revelations. And if they're not stopped, which I'm guessing is what the church is trying to do by distancing themselves
Exactly.
from Tim Ballard right now, is they're trying to put a stop in something, which, if this faction is large enough, like I think it will literally lead to a type of schism within the Mormon church, because these two things cannot coexist for very much longer. Okay.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
agree.
Next. So where was I? That, yeah, everything about the donors, everything is done by a psychic talking to Nephi. And that this paramilitary operations, like, don't you think that these donors would be very dismayed that these missions were being guided by a psychic and a deceased Mormon prophet's quote, donors are not made aware that Nephi via Mr. Russin is the key piece to OUR's operational intelligence, he added.
Mm-hmm.
Criminal investigators were interested in the nexus between Russin, Tim Ballard, and the church. One document Vice News obtained is a memo describing an interview between the FBI special agent and the Davis County investigator and a former OUR development director. Okay? Development director of OUR, whom we are not naming at her request. So this is like the breaking part of the news where somebody didn't want to go quite on record. This person said that she had not heard that Janet was ever vetted or vouched for by the LDS Church, the memo reads, but stated Tim blurred lines and would frequently say, I told Elder Ballard all about it. So she's like, is everything, are we supposed to be talking to a psychic who's talking to our dead Mormon prophets? And he's like, yeah, I told Elder Ballard, and it's all kosher. It's all fine.
Mm-hmm.
So, to jump to, again, the ways that the LDS Church itself is kind of trying to scrub their connection with Tim Ballard right now is really interesting. But he is somebody who has promoted Mormonism, again, who's thought that central to his ideology is to bring people to the Mormon church, as stated in this Vice article. And the church has been fine with that type of reciprocal relationship. So I could pull it up right now, but there are pictures of all of the different news articles on the LDS Church's websites about supporting, like, you know, Tim Ballard is this guy who rescues children, and here's his testimony of Jesus Christ, and he's trying to bring as many people to Christ as possible. These have all been articles on the LDS Church's website. I found, for instance, Ensign College is owned by the LDS Church. It used to be called, was it BYU or BYU Business School? I'm getting that wrong. Somebody help me out. But he has a speech there, and there's a picture that I also found of, on the left is Sean Reyes and him before these different meetings and donor talks. They're saying a prayer, like as if they're in elders quorum or something. They're saying a prayer for Mormon God to come and bless these meetings and these operations, right? And within the quotes from one of his speeches, that this is from Ensign, it says that, and this was the single kind of breaking point for me where I made a decision with my wife after much prayer and fasting to leave the government and go looking for these kids who are outside the jurisdiction of the United States. And Gardy Marty was one of those parent kids that was missing, who had a disastrous operation that failed miserably, that was all guided apparently by these psychics. But again, to reiterate, he has a family. They go to the temple. Mormonism is not something that is a sideline to their life. Their entire life is Mormonism and acting in accordance with what they feel God has laid on their heart of what they should be doing. So this definitely is a mission from God himself of these operations he should be doing. So for the very church that he feels like he's doing this for, that told him to do it, that he's saying that M. Russell Ballard told him to start these operations, that he went through prayer and fasting, and that's what they were told. For the very church that he's been trying to do all this for, denouncing him is a really big deal. It's a really big deal. It's a real shock to the system. I'd have to say
it's a really big deal. Do you feel like we've covered everything?
The last thing we got to cover is Glenn Beck. And then
Okay.
you are hungry and ready to go get sushi. I know.
You're doing great, Kara. I am just thrilled that you headed up our operation. The operation to
right.
take down the operations.
All right. Talk for a second while I go find the slide I need.
Okay, so while you're finding the slide, Oscar just joined the live. Everyone, this is Oscar Meyer, and he's my favorite wiener. And we just started some merch, and you can find a shirt with his face on it that says Wiener Fan. So if you haven't already, check out our new merch. We have some pretty cool stuff over there. We have some shirts that say Apostates Unite, Break the Silence, Break the Cycle, some with our logo. If you just want to support the channel, that would be awesome. You can find it at cultstoconsciousness.com under merch or shalisansola.com under merch. And what else, babe? What other shirts do we have in there? Well, we have our FU Amen line that was inspired by one of our guests. Actually, she's a survivor of child trafficking, familial child trafficking. And she said sometimes it's just really therapeutic to swear and say, fuck you. And so she's like, and then I pray after. And I was like, that's great. We should have a shirt that says, fuck you, amen. So we created a whole line. So if you're interested in getting one of those t-shirts or hats, you can go check that out.
Congrats on the 100K, everyone.
Thanks, Kara.
My Exmo sister in Christ has hit 100K.
Thank you.
Congratulations. That's huge. So finally, I've been toying with this all day. I've been teasing you all with it the entire time. We can share my screen, which I don't have the button to do, or do I?
No, is it this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Mormon Stories posted this today. And it reads something way too small for me to read. It says, Glenn Beck attacks the Mormon Church in defense of Tim Ballard, and I respond, meaning John Dehlin. If you think this behavior of discarding loyalists when convenient and lying about it when necessary is new to the LDS Church, you never knew the LDS Church. Like, oh man, that's such a smackdown. So Glenn Beck, again, is somebody who wears Mormonism on his sleeve. He talks about it all the time. He has when he had his old cable news channel, and he is very open that he's LDS and has been a supporter of Tim Ballard. And he came out on his Twitter, I think last night, and said, things my church never used to do. 1, effectively excommunicate church members without giving them adequate notice of or an opportunity to respond to accusations. That's actually kind of always happened, but that's neither here nor there. 2, effectively excommunicate church members by means of public statements issued by the news media by unnamed church spokespersons. Again, if I go back to the Vice News article, I think his name is actually in there. I'm being a bad reporter right now. Sorry. 3, effectively excommunicate church members through ambiguous but unquestionably damning statements casually provided to publications that hate the church, its members, and everything they stand for. He is mad. He's like, and you told Vice about that? Where is that at the bottom? He's talking about Vice.
I don't know. I can't see it. It's too small.
And then next. Did that change the page?
Yeah, it did.
Okay. Effectively excommunicate. Yeah. And then it goes on to say, effectively excommunicate church members from church headquarters with neither involvement or notice to local ecclesiastical leaders. And again, what he's saying by effectively excommunicate, because there's ways to excommunicate. We go through the offices, and they have the disciplinary council, and there's like a trial, and you're able to talk, and usually that's the way to excommunicate. But to lose your covenants, your ordinances, you'd have to be rebaptized into the church. Being excommunicated is a very serious thing. A lot of people who are excommunicated, they don't want to be members of the church anymore, but in this type of situation, it's not that he's literally losing all of his covenants and ordinances and have to be rebaptized. It's just, I don't know how he's going to survive. I don't know how Tim Ballard's going to survive in the Mormon church with such a rebuke. Yeah, like this. Effectively excommunicate church members through church staff, not priesthood offices. That's again very interesting that he's being ousted by the person who has the mantle of authority at the PR department. And then John Dehlin responded, with respect, Glenn Beck, I'm not sure you know the Church of Jesus Christ very well. The Mormon church uses you until you're no longer useful. Then they discard you. Happened to me. It's been that way since 1830. I said that weird. It's been that way since 1830. Oddly, I actually feel sympathy for Tim Ballard. What do you think, Shelise? Do you feel any empathy for Tim Ballard?
I don't know. I guess it's hard to say because I don't know him personally. I don't know his intentions with all of these things. Based on what we've covered tonight, I feel like he has brought that upon himself. I think a lot of it comes back to that whiteboard meeting. It just leaves a really bad feeling in my gut where all of this is self-serving and it has this facade of I'm helping children and I'm doing God's work, but in reality, it's just a bunch of self-serving BS to prop him up and do what he thinks. Granted, he thinks he's doing the right thing of the ends justify the means of bringing people to the covenant, bringing people into the one true church on the planet according to Mormonism. So I think maybe his intentions may be right or close to the right place, but the execution of it, not thinking it through in that way, doing these things just for the wrong reasons, for clout, all of that just makes me feel gross. So again, I don't know if I can say I feel empathy for him necessarily, although I can say that that would definitely suck. As we've mentioned, he's doing everything for this organization that just said, no thanks, we don't want anything to do with you. Yeah, that's really crappy. But I feel most sorry for his kids because they're really the innocent ones in this who are going to get a lot of backlash. And that's really sad.
Yeah, I definitely feel bad for the kids who are caught up in all of this. Then especially if he does end up running for Senate and potentially winning, what that would turn into.
Yeah. I don't even want to think about that.
Would you mind me reading one last thing, or you ready
Okay,
to
go
wrap
for
it
it.
up? I just wanted to, it's not on the screen. I'm just going to read it. We can just look at
Oh,
my pretty
okay.
faces. I just thought I always love to grab kind of what the word on the ground is of what other commentary people are giving. So one person on the Mormon Stories page said, anyone who considers a psychic channeling of Nephi as actionable intelligence to send Americans into foreign places, often dangerous, which could hurt them as us, the human race, should not be given the authority to vote and legislate on our behalf. Again, if that's that's his mode of operation, that does call into question what type of senator he would be. Another person said, an apostle couldn't discern conmen, almost like that famous picture of Hinckley, again, with Mark Hoffman. And I also wanted to bring up that we mentioned that there was another apostle that was also in, at the bottom of a Vice article, it talks about Tim Ballard also meeting with Elder Rasband of the Quorum of the 12, I believe. And that when asked for comment, if he had anything to say about his connection with Tim Ballard, he says that he doesn't remember ever meeting him, which RFM, Radio Free Mormon, on his podcast on the same topic today pointed out RFM is an attorney. And he said, that's the type of comment that you leave where you want to leave it ambiguous, that if somebody has evidence coming forward later that you did have a meeting, that you're able to say, oh, I remember now. Yeah. So
interesting.
Glenn Beck, when a right-wing grifter using the church for his brand gets slapped on the wrist by, So Glenn Beck, for the actual excommunications of John Dehlin, Natasha Helfer, Sam Young, who specifically fought for policies in the church to be changed. He was a bishop who was excommunicated, saying we need to end these predatory private bishop interviews between
sexually charged interviews,
exactly, where he's asking, do you masturbate, all of the things that happen behind closed doors with minors and bishops. Sam Young was a bishop who specifically asked the LDS Church in every route that he knew how to protect children, and for speaking out against it was excommunicated. So Sam Young was a big problem when I was still a faithful Mormon, that I could not believe the church did that the church that I believed in was going out of its way to protect itself as an institution and not do what was in the best interest of kids. So when Glenn Beck is like, there's actual excommunications with John Dehlin, Natasha Helfer, Sam Young, and a nearly endless and ever-growing list of historians, therapists, advocates, activists, and LGBTQ individuals sleeping on it. And Glenn Beck, when a right-wing grifter using the church for his brand gets a slap on the wrist by church corporate anger, anger, fuel, rage. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's ironic, it's painful that certain things that people care about, it's in their faction, if it's in their investments. And I'll just end it by saying that the church has, deleted all of their references to anything Tim Ballard. It's fascinating. I'm looking to see if like the entire Rod Meldrum faction of the church, the Firm Foundation, the Book of Mormon Evidence Conference, who's had Tim Ballard speak at all their conferences as keynote speaker for years. Their website's down right now. I'm curious to see what will come back on their website when it comes back up. And then people like Glenn Beck and people like Rod Meldrum and people who host these types of thought of Tim Ballard, if they will take any accountability for giving him a platform to spread misinformation and to prop up his own for-profit businesses and stuff like that. There's one last slide I do want to show real quick, but I just forgot.
Okay.
And you're probably running out of time. You're like, Kara, you over-prepared too much. It's true.
You did a great job.
You got me started talking. You're like, do you want to do a live stream with me? And I said, do I? Can I share this other one real quick?
Yeah.
People are going to say, thank you for being so thorough. And I enjoy that. How do I get that to throw up on screen? Not throw up on screen, but you know what I mean? This one.
Oh, the other one?
Yeah.
This one.
Yeah. Let me just go ahead and I just want to play a little bit of the rest of his clip of him ranting, because then I have another last point.
Somebody is trying to exploit this relationship. Never happened. I have never. Frankly, it would be a horrible donation pitch. It would hurt me more than it would help me. I don't want to be attached to some religious denomination. That's not going to help me.
That's such a lie. That is such a lie.
Okay.
Again. What did when he asked his son, what does M. Russell Ballard think of this whole thing? And he says, yeah, he loves the American covenant. That is specifically his son knowing that this entire operation he is running is in concert with Mormonism. And Mormonism goes from Nephi, the Book of Mormon, to the current leadership and authority in Russell M. Ballard. You can't disconnect that. So that is really crazy for him to say that. Why would I want to tie this to Mormonism? I don't know. Your entire staff is Mormon. Your donor base. You live in Utah. Continue anyway.
Hurt me. Never did it. But somebody decided to make up this story. My children are being horrified. My children. My wife has lived a life of a widow.
Which I don't deny. I'm sure this has all been very hard.
Yeah.
I'm just going to randomly hope that there's one last thing.
I'm the bad guy in the story that rescued over 7,000 women and children. Can you help me understand that? How can I be the bad guy here? I'm not perfect. I'm as human as anybody. But how is it that my decisions and my actions, which led to the rescue of over 7,000 women and children, and the arrest and imprisonment of over 5,000 traffickers and pedophiles, you tell me how I'm the bad guy in that story? How is it possible? I pray to God the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints wasn't part of this. I don't know yet. I don't know. I can tell you this much. My stake president knew nothing about it. My bishop knew nothing about it. If the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints wants to condemn me publicly before the world, in the moment that I'm trending, and please don't take this the wrong way, but The Sound of Freedom is the #1 movie in Latin America. It's the #1 movie.
Do you want to hear my conspiracy theory?
Yeah.
I've never wanted a conspiracy theory to kind of be more true though. Okay. So once you
Okay.
said that, pretend that Tim Ballard, yes, he is a very imperfect man. Let's say best case scenario, he's done a lot of shady stuff, but his best intentions are to out child sex traffickers, pedophiles, and he really does have a heart for that. He just goes about it in unethical, exploitive ways that also make him a lot of money and raise his clout. Okay. What if in his investigations, he found some type of sex trafficking ring or something within Mormonism that he was about to be like a whistleblower on, or something within his organization where the Mormon church was going to be held accountable or liable for something that his organization uncovered, and that they needed to discredit him before that came out? Because that's in the realm of possibilities, because the church is known for hiding child sex, pedophiles and things. Again, going back to its founding, but even in recent history, if you watch the Mormon Stories episode that just came out a couple days ago, I literally texted John and said that was the best Mormon Stories I've ever seen, with Adam, and I forget his last name. If anyone wants to help me out right now, Adam, who's my new hero, who was abused within the LDS context of the Boy Scouts of America for years, and the ways that they moved around these scouting leaders, the higher ups that knew about it, the way that the church and its law arm, Curtin and McConkie, fought against getting the laws changed for statute of limitations in Idaho, and fought bringing these different pedophiles to justice. Like, the church has been highly exploitive and suspect in all of these ways. And my most kind thing I could say is that I'm thinking that maybe there is a conspiracy going on here where maybe they don't want anyone sniffing around their business anymore. That's one way to look at it. That's one.
So I think, yes, that could be possible. But also, I don't feel it in my gut that I want to give Tim Ballard that much credit, because also he's doing most of this stuff overseas, right? And I think a lot of the child abuse scandals are happening in the States, but I could be wrong too. I don't know. I think yes, there's definitely a lot of abuse cover-ups within the church. And on the other hand, Tim Ballard is exploiting children while also simultaneously saving them, but in these questionable ways that we need more answers for. So, I don't know, maybe.
It's not that I believe it. I'm just saying it's a possibility.
It's a possibility.
I'm just saying there's just, again, my passion is to end this type of exploitive behavior and things. And it's just ironic that it's coming from a church that has such a hotbed of abuse and ecclesiastical abuse of children and these mantles of power, that it's like you don't need to go to foreign countries to play white savior when your church has its own problems. And within its doctrine, within its policies right now, actively excommunicating bishops who try to make it better. Like, the call is coming from inside the house, like in Mormonism. It's not that you need to go play white savior in a different country.
Yeah, I agree. And I really quickly want to say thank you for everyone who has joined us. Combined between my channel and yours, Kara, we have almost 1,300 people watching, which is really great. And normally we do spend more time taking questions, but this one was just so packed with information. So have to give a shout out to our super chat. Thank you so much for your donation. And thank you guys, everybody, for watching, tuning in. If you're watching this later, thank you. We really want to do our best to get the news out in the best possible way and the most accurate news, which is why Kara put together all of this research for us today. So yeah, thank you so much, Kara. You nailed it.
I rushed through it. I hope it all made sense. It's the job of a mom to be on the computer and being like, yeah, we're going live in an hour. Here's an Uncrustable. So this is what you get with like having 2 hours to prep. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thanks everyone for my channel tuning in. Love you guys so much. And you guys are obviously already following Shelise because she's the best. And
thanks,
again,
Kara.
100,000 subscribers, the best interviews, 2 Exmo gals, just no one knowing where it's at on YouTube. Just love you so much. And I'm coming to visit you in a little bit too.
Yay! I love you so much. And now I want an Uncrustable. That sounds really good. So yes, go follow Kara Nuancehoe if you haven't already. This has been awesome. Go check out our brand new merch. One of our shirts has Oscar Mayer's face on it. It's really cute. I think it's really cute. But a lot of other things in there that you guys might like. You can find it at cultstoconsciousness.com or shaliseansola.com under the merch tab. So thank you guys so much. This has been amazing. We have one more super chat. Phyllis, thank you so much. We appreciate you. And I think that's it. Any final words, Kara?
Nope. Child sex trafficking, very, very bad. Using the least exploitive means that are the best practices that have checks and balances and are good. So just want to make sure, parting words, that we are not misunderstood on that, you know?
Yes. Great point. If they made it this far, trolls usually don't make it in very far, but here we are. Anyway, thank you guys so much, everyone. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious and be well.